Hello, everyone. Today we are talking about the Texan gerrymandering and its consequences for the 2026 midterms and beyond. So, today we're going to be talking about the news, what's been going on with Texas, and how other states have reacted. And I will be using these national politics as an excuse to give more of an educational viewpoint as to how to approach politics and how it can actually help you in your own personal life. So the big question is, can future interactions motivate cooperation today? And or what is the end game like? And how do states act accordingly? So, to get into the news, Trump has always been worried about his slim majority in the House. Happened in the first term, will happen again. A good instance of that is the fact that earlier in the month of July, every Republican had to be whipped into supporting the big beautiful bill, or otherwise it would have been shot down. And Trump imposed a deadline of July the 3rd to get signing on it. But there were weeks of battles where a lot of Republicans, like Thomas Massey, disagreed with the bill. So there was a lot of negotiation and whipping around that had to be done. So to avoid that in the future, Trump, well, I'll let you decide, right? There happened, the DOJ under Trump happened to find 4 or 5 Texan districts to be unconstitutional in the sense that the districts were found to be racially gerrymandered. And coincidentally, Abbott has stepped up to consider a proposal that would redistrict those same seats, which are 4 or 5 House seats, which is what Trump needs to keep his majority in the House. Again, you're welcome to speculate as to whether or not that DOJ claim is bogus or not. I can't fault you, but it basically gives Abbott the green light in July to have a mid-decade redistricting proposal, and that is unique for a reason that I will mention later. Just keep that in mind. So we go forward a few weeks. In August 2nd, the proposal in the special session includes the committee's redistricting proposal that would add up to 5 seats in Texas and would basically wipe out uh, the Democrats in Texas, if I'm not mistaken. Um, the following day, on August 3rd, 40 plus Democrats break quorum, which is necessary to hold any vote on redistricting. Everyone has to be present for the vote to go through. And because of that, the following day, because there's no quorum, failure to convene means that the vote fails automatically. Like it's not even introduced, and it leads to Texas's Attorney General Ken Paxton to authorize arrests or civil warrants for the Democrats that you can see on the left to come back to Texas. Prominent Texan representatives like Jane Wu, as seen in the middle of this photo, fled to Illinois. Some fled to New York. They basically went to Democrat strongholds to avoid going to vote. And while that has been happening, Democratic governors like Newsom of California and Hochul of New York are bowing to have their own redistricting plan if Texas does go through with its gerrymandering. So there's a lot to unpack there, right? Um, where do we even start, right? That's basically the timeline. So to simplify it for you, Trump needs majority. Democrats void him of it. Abbott mad. and other Democrats are vowing to play the same game. And again, right, this is for the midterms. So the reason why that's odd and obviously politically blatant is because gerrymandering usually happens every decade. So a year or two after the US Census comes out. So, for example, in 2020, the US Census came out, and Texas had its own redistricting proposals done the year or two afterwards, as did other states like Florida, Illinois, Michigan, if I'm not mistaken. So this is usually like a national norm. It's not constitutionally binding. There's no interstate compact that I'm aware of, but that's just how a lot of states go about it. So if Texas gerrymanders, assuming that no other Democratic state does, then Trump has the majority throughout his entire term, which means that he gets to avoid the political embarrassments that had happened in the lead up to the Big Beautiful Bill, for example. However, if Texas gerrymanders and Democratic states follow suit with their own gerrymandering, Democrats do have the capacity to neuter any Republican leads. However, the caveat is that it depends on how fast Democratic governors can act, right? The reason I say that is because for a state to successfully gerrymander, they're usually done by the state legislator, right? So by the prominent political party. So in that case, who would be legislating their redistricting in Texas? It would be Republicans. That does not necessarily translate in other major Democratic states. California, for instance, has an independent commission that would require constitutional amendment. However, Newsom has allegedly come up with plans to have the citizens directly vote for a short period of time. Um, and New York would require two legislative approvals and a public vote. So New York would take until like 2028 for their redistricting to go into effect. Again, because both have independent commissions. So if Trump is worried about losing midterms, then his opportunity to strike would be now, or for the GOP to strike would be now. However, redistricting wars across the US would take place. Michigan and New York and California and Texas, etc., etc. And they might spill over beyond Trump's term, which is shaky for the Republicans if they are trying to get JD Vance, for instance, or Marco Rubio to be president. As again, it would let the Democrats have a theoretical advantage, and we will get into that theoretical advantage in a little bit. So, okay, you might be asking yourselves, okay, how do we get from prisoner's dilemma to from the states doing all their shenanigans? It's basically the most clear cut case that I can put it that rationalizes Republicans and Democrats right now. Prisoner's Dilemma is a classic strategy of game theory whereby two prisoners have the option of snitching or not snitching. In this case, if neither snitches, they both get some jail time, but it's not a whole lot. I don't know, let's say 3 months. However, if one or the other prisoner snitches, then the snitcher would get, I don't know, nothing or 1 month at most. The snitched or the prisoner told on would get 5 months in jail. However, if both snitch, then they both get 2 months in jail. The bottom line is that prisoners would collectively have an incentive to cooperate. However, they individually have a reason to snitch. In the context of what we're talking about today, it would be collectively rational to leave districts alone, as it does not upset your lead uh, or what you already have. However, it is in the each party's individual interest to gerrymander. And to get that to the chart, I color coded it so it should be easy to follow along. R stands for Republican, D stands for Democrat. So if they both cooperate, or in this case, they don't gerrymander or leave the state alone, leave the districts as they are, then neither really loses any seats, right? Or neither has any advantage over the other. The House is pretty tight. Defections can easily occur within, but forget about the externalities for now. However, if Democrats don't gerrymander, as I just explained earlier, but if Republicans do gerrymander, then Republicans gain the House majority. If Republicans, for some reason, don't decide to not gerrymander, but Democrats do, then it's the Democrats that gain the House majority. However, if both gerrymander, then multi-state gerrymandering takes place, and they both are likely to lose seats either way. Or they wouldn't gain as much as they would if they just left it alone. So again, it is collectively irrational to leave states alone, as the status quo happens and no one really loses. However, both the Republican and the Democrat would have individual rationality in gerrymandering, as one or the other would be gaining seats and the other would be the sucker. And it's a finite game, right? In the sense that if Trump, wants his lead by 2026, then there's only really one round of this prisoner's dilemma that can take place, which is, again, right, everything leading up to 2026. And after that, Trump is out of office, so the majority in 2028 wouldn't really matter, right? So under Grim Trigger, right, which means that they would be playing infinitely. Or sorry, I'm spacing out. Texas is redistricting, which is the trigger towards basically the Grim Trigger concept, would result in more states endlessly gerrymandering, right? The multi-state gerrymandering thing. So states would have to consider what they might potentially win now, or I'm sorry, Republicans and Democrats would have to consider what they would win today by gerrymandering in the midterms and what they would win or lose when considering 2028 and beyond. So that is why gerrymandering is a very politically touchy subject. It's not the biggest reason as to why polarization happens, but because both parties have an incentive to entrench their political hegemony over a state, that keeps a lot of safe states and safe seats in the House. And in the context of the midterms, you, as the incumbent party, would not want to lose seats. But the opposition party, which would be the Democrats, would have a reason to do so. And because it is time sensitive, again, right, the midterms, there is an increased reason to gerrymander. So, if it will let me go back. Sorry, that's weird. It's my first time making YouTube videos. I apologize. I will get better. Trust me. Anyways, back to what we were saying. Individual reward, right? So Republican or Democrats' rewards are superior to mutual rewards, which would be not gerrymandering, would make gerrymandering preferable. Again, it's a finite game in the sense that Trump directly asked for this in a blatant manner. So there's an incentive to gerrymander on the GOP's behalf to uphold the midterm edge. However, if we're taking a step beyond that and just analyzing the politics again, overall, the erosion of norms lowers the cost of defection on the GOP's behalf. So Trump's DOJ basically backing up gerrymandering, the Senate majority already favoring Trump, incentivizes a reason for Republicans to gerrymander. And that forces Democrats to also consider gerrymandering because of the fact that, um, let's put this in a nice way, Trump's illiberal actions towards upholding his mandate gives incentive for the Democrats to fight back, right? As this is no longer perceived as a fair fight. And I mean, Abbott already did move forward with the first step. So again, that is the trigger that is causing Democrats to retaliate and probably just go through with it anyways if it looks like Abbott is going to redistrict, which has been the move that he's been making. However, Abbott has been unsuccessful because of the Democratic's departure. Uh, but there are ways in which Texas can bring those Democrats back and force a vote. And it is really whether or not they are forced to sit and lose to the Republicans in gerrymandering in Texas that will determine whether or not other Democrats just follow suit and gerrymander, or if they do it anyways. Again, looking at the political situation or the overall status of democracy in the US, political incentives will entrench polarization at the national level, and it will decrease state competitiveness from other parties. So, again, if Republicans go along with redistricting, then the competitor parties like Democrats will no longer be as capable of winning. The same rings true in California, where essentially, if Newsom does go along with the plans that he has proposed, which would give Democrats 10 more seats in the House, which would give them the majority and basically wipe Republicans off of California. The same can be true to an extent in New York, although I'm not sure about the specifics on New York. Nonetheless, it does show that there are a lot of complications in gerrymandering, and outside of the political games that Democrats and Republicans have to play in terms of strategizing for their congressional power, it does overall erode democratic norms. And people should be asking themselves if gerrymandering is worth, on behalf of Democrats, it should be worth wondering if Democrats, one, if they can pull it off in time and beat Republicans, and two, if that would allow them to just permanently penalize Republicans, because under Grim Trigger, that would be the strategy, right? Oh, Republicans open this Pandora's box. Now I will make sure you pay for it tenfold. In economics, for instance, what's a good example that I can drive? If say I were to have a seller or a produce seller, let's name him, I don't know, Mark, and Mark has consistently given me good vegetables, but one day he just gives me a batch of raw vegetables. Uh, that would trigger me to basically not buy any more product from him indefinitely, and that would be the punishment, right? No more commerce or purchases from my end. That would be the Democratic strategy under this. The Republican strategy is to just go along with what they're already doing, right? If Trump and Abbott open this Pandora's box, then, and if they fear Democrat retaliation, as they already have started making steps towards redistricting and blocking the redistricting on the Democrats' behalf, then unfortunately, what this means is that it is pretty likely that Texas will be seeing a gerrymandered state within the next few months. However, again, it completely depends on how Democrats are willing to act in terms of time, because this is very time sensitive. But it's also for a myriad of other reasons, right? So a lot of people are speculating that as Newsom and Hochul are eyeing up the presidential ticket in 2028, retaliating and gerrymandering might benefit their own personal strides, right? So as Newsom was already standing up against Trump in the LA protests, that gave him a lot of national eyes, which means that he is perceived as an anti-Trump or a Trump-resistant political figure, and this would give him credit. The same would go with Hochul. Again, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing her name. Feel free to correct me. But that is, in sum, what I wanted to express, right? I wanted this to be a little educational so that you didn't come away blackpilled. But I did also want to analyze what the theoretical strategies both parties would make under this dilemma, which is gerrymandering. If you still do not know what gerrymandering is, basically think of drawing ugly borders in a way that suits the incumbent, whatever party is drawing it, right? Imagine you're in this circle and there's like 10 candies, and you're the biggest kid, so you get to control. Uh, you get to decide how the candies split, and you just like split it across 8 candies going towards you and 2 going to other people. That's basically gerrymandering. It's not the best explanation, but it is the simplest one that I can give. So there are a lot of other consequences that will happen likely because of gerrymandering, but that remains to be seen. Anyways, I thought, let me know if you learned anything new, if you walked away with a very different perspective, if there's any other strategies that you might have considered, or if my explanation was even simple or digestible. But anyways, that's all I have. So yeah, thank you all and have a great day.